Hi, I'm Gareth. Welcome along to Somewhere on Earth. And somewhere in the studio with us this time is Peter Guest, who's an investigative technology journalist. And Peter, I think I got that right. What else do we need to know about you? And the reason I'm going into all this detail is A, to put you on the spot, but B, because you're going to be a regular contributor to this programme, and listeners need to just get to know you because they are going to hear from you as my so-called presenter's friend as we go along. What do they need to know?
Thanks, Gareth. Well, as you say, I'm an investigative journalist. I tend to work at the places where technology meets society or meets politics. So that's whether that's internet blackouts or social media disinformation or the economics of conspiracy theories online.
And you write a bit about business as well?
Every now and again.
Now and then, okay. So pretty versatile, I'd say, but I think you pretty much nailed it there, that you're into the investigative stuff, you know, the I suppose the rights and the issues related side of technology journalism. We've nailed it there, Peter. We know who you are, so let's get going. And coming up today, keeping Pete and I company are three fabulous guests. One has been significantly bumping up diversity on Wikipedia, having added around 2,000 entries about women scientists. Also on the guest list today is the CEO of the US startup that's converting plastic waste into small houses using 3D printing. Also, we have a tech investor in our midst. So what kind of businesses does he invest in? Well, I'll give you a clue. You're listening to one. That's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. So many people to say hello to. So let's start with Jess Wade of Imperial College. And we're going to hear from you as we go along, and we're going to hear about the work that you're doing with Wikipedia, adding women scientists to Wikipedia, people who've otherwise been missing, and you're well known for that, so we will get into that. But Jess, can you just first of all tell us about your science? What is your day job? You're at Imperial College, you're a research fellow, aren't you?
I'm a research fellow and I'm a lecturer in functional materials, and what I'm really excited about is looking for new materials for quantum technologies. Everyone around the world has got very excited about quantum computers and quantum systems for sensing or imaging. At the moment, we use materials like superconductors and semiconductors that are kind of energy intensive to make and quite difficult to work with and difficult to integrate into devices. And what I'm really excited about, what we're really excited about at Imperial, is trying to use molecules, to use the kind of rich library of chemistry to design a materials with exactly the quantum properties that we want, that can enable quantum functionality at room temperature without requiring the kind of complicated cryogenic cooling that superconductors need. So new materials for quantum technologies so that we can have a brighter tomorrow benefiting from all of these remarkable quantum phenomena.
Quantum technologies. And of course, there'll be many of our listeners who at least have heard, I'm sure, of this thing called quantum computing. I've become mildly fascinated, if not obsessed with it, just in the last year or so. And my very basic understanding, and you can put me right on this, is that quantum computing is a potential, well, it's beginning to happen, but it's a potential of taking computing away from what we could think of as the classical computing model, where all problems are broken down into ones and zeros. Because computers are basically stupid, aren't they? They can only count to one. But in quantum computing, then you're able to kind of take the computer from just those binary states of 0 and 1. And some people say a qubit, so that's like the bit in a quantum computer, isn't it? Some people say, hey, it can be both a 0 and 1 at the same time. Isn't it more the case that it's in a probabilistic state of somewhere between 0 and 1 at the same time?
Right, so it's in this superposition of 0 and 1, and actually that lets you do all of these really complicated algorithms and complicated calculations. Quantum computers are really, really good at some things. They're really good at route optimization, so deciding a really difficult route, whether that's to get around a city or to track ships around the ocean. And that's because they have this space between the 0 and 1 of a conventional classical bit. Or they're really, really really good at things like designing complicated materials or drug discovery because they can explore a whole landscape of options without having to go to that binary system. So there are certain problems that quantum computers will be one day really good at solving.
Okay, so that's the good news. The bad news is they need to work at very low temperatures.
The bad news is the ones that the most big tech companies at the moment are investing in materials that have to operate at really low temperatures, which are really, really energy intensive, massively power demanding, and not very compatible with thinking about the more sustainable way we're trying to imagine technologies of the future.
Which is where you and the chemists are coming in saying, hey, if we could just come up with designer molecules, as you put it, then we might be able to make this very exciting technology work at temperatures other than the coldest thing in the universe, therefore
exactly
so much refrigeration. Because a quantum computer is just like an amazing thing with a hugely powerful fridge attached to it. You just need a fridge that's less powerful.
We may not even need a fridge. We may be able to do it around temperature.
You are blowing my tiny mind. But there are, of course, risks in all this, and investors are looking on, many of them really piling in. I mean, billions has already gone into quantum computing. I wonder what an investor might think. Thank goodness that we have Evan Main-Donald around the table, who we are going to hear from again. Evan, we're going to get to you and do a proper interview later in the show. But wearing your investor hat, what do you make of quantum computing? And then hearing somebody like Jess Wade sitting here in the studio saying, hey, folks, we can give you quantum computers and quantum technologies in general that don't need this very high energy cost of being refrigerated right down to ridiculously cold temperatures.
I think technology has a history of being incubated in educational establishments and then making its way into commercial spaces. And you need that research base to actually kick the whole thing off. I mean, it works really well in the US where you have university endowment funds who invest in venture capital, and then the money that gets made out of those venture capital investments gets ploughed back into the universities. We're not so strong on that yet, or at the moment, I think, in the UK and Europe, but I think that's a model that works really well. But no, without a doubt, I mean, quantum computing is very interesting, and if somebody could deliver room temperature quantum computing, a little bit like nuclear fusion, if somebody could deliver a low energy version, containable version of nuclear fusion, that would be something that investors would jump on.
No, sure thing. And Evan mentioned universities there, Jess, but of course, you're at a university, so you're the right person to comment on this. But a load of money is also coming in from state actors and defence as well, isn't it? Especially over worries among many nation states about the potential of this technology to break encryption and do some very interesting. You don't have to comment necessarily on the dark side, but what about that point Evan made about universities?
Well, I think the UK government have put a lot of money into it recently. In March, they committed, the National Quantum Strategy in the UK commits £2.5 billion over the next 10 years to developing new quantum technologies, to training the next generation of quantum researchers. And that's all based on these kind of industry, academia partnerships and building a really robust quantum ecosystem in the UK. We actually have a phenomenal program, probably modelled on America at Imperial, but a deep technology program that's working with the business school and trying to bring in venture capital money and make us understand how to communicate complicated science to investors, and also make venture capital people excited about the potential of quantum technology. So I think the UK is starting to learn about the need for this kind of accelerator program and incubator system. But you're right, we're nowhere near as advanced as America in that area.
All right, okay. Well, let's talk further as we go along, Evan, because I do want to meet our next guest, CEO Ross Maguire. I say he's a CEO. He's a CEO of a company that makes 3D printed homes. So just give us the name of your company there, please, Ross. And just tell us what you're doing, 3D printed houses.
Yeah, so our company name is Azure Printed Homes, and we're essentially taking plastic waste, recycling it, adding some strengtheners like carbon fiber and glass fiber, and then printing it in our factory to create very unique designs and structures that are printed in one day, and then we complete the rest of the prefabrication process so that we deliver units that are ready to plug in and fix to a foundation and live in immediately. So we're trying to solve a few problems, i.e. the housing crisis and environmental issues that we have with the amount of waste that's produced in construction and building homes. And
sure, even as part of the relief effort after disasters, I want to get into that. Just to explain to the dear listener, you are in your factory at the moment, all is quiet, at present.
Yes.
But in the sound check, we heard all kinds of stuff going on in there. Unlike us, you're not in this hermetically sealed, acoustically optimized environment. And I'm rather hoping we get some banging, some crashing, some machine noises there to listen. It really gets a sense of location. Okay, so we'll get into some of the use cases, but I'm also interested in the actual raw material here, though. So this is plastic waste. I'm assuming things like plastic bottles that have been thrown away, stuff that you're picking up from recycling centres. So how much of one of your 3D printed houses, what proportion of a particular building is made from recycled materials?
So one of our largest module print that we do is a 10 by 20 foot. Sorry, it's feet.
We can convert. You're in America. We're in the UK. We like feet as well, but I said not the feet we walk on, but you know what I mean. But yeah, for our international listeners, what you said, 10 or 20 feet, that's about 3 or 4 meters. Okay.
And we have around, in each one of those units, each one of those modules that we print, there's around 100,000 plastic bottles that goes into each one, to kind of give you a gauge on the number and the amount that goes into it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So you need, obviously, a lot of raw material. But what I'm trying to get a handle on is when you say that the places are made out of recyclables, I mean, is it like just 10% of one of these houses, maybe more like 50 or 100? Whereabouts are you proportionally speaking?
In our print material, around 70% of it is recycled material.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about the cost of living crisis that I know is a big burden in many countries, and housing crises apart from anything else. But also, what about in the disaster relief side of things? Can you tell me more about how your houses may be, or perhaps already have, been part of, for instance, helping in Maui following the flooding?
Yeah, they had fires actually in Maui. They had wildfires that took out...
Wrong disaster.
Fire, yeah. Part of the island, yeah. So they lost, I think the count was up to 2,000 or so homes. But an organisation here in the States called FEMA reached out to us asking what the potential speed and quantity that we could deliver to Maui. And we obviously, with our products, we've thought about that sort of thing in the past, not just emergency relief, but also to isolated areas. And the benefit of our technology is that it's kind of suited to isolated islands and locations, because creating a manufacturing plant is relatively quick for us to set up. It only takes 2 to 3 weeks for us to get a system up and running in a new location. With obviously the lead times for a lot of our components are a little bit longer, but it takes 2 to 3 weeks to set up an assembly line, and then we can produce a unit a day off of each printer. So our speed of response is quite quick, and obviously we're utilizing waste from the area as well. So it's Oh, so the waste is sourced locally as well then? Here in the States, we try to keep it as local as we can. I mean, that's a big part of the motivation to use recycled waste, is because I think even if you take plastic in isolation, around, I think only like 6% of the waste in the US that is sent for recycling is actually reused. So like the other 90 odd percent still goes into landfill, even though we're separating it in our recycling centers and sending it off. There's a huge amount that's ready to be reused. So. All right. Yeah. Okay. So efficient use of materials there, says Ross. What says Peter Guest here, listening to this here in London? And what do you make of these, 3D printed homes from recycled materials?
That's fascinating. Ross, I'd love to maybe hear from you a little bit about what the process of setting up the facility is actually like, because you're talking about manufacturing, you're talking about building supply chains. I'm envisioning factories and power plants and shipping containers. These are things you don't get in a disaster zone. These are things you don't get in an isolated island. So how do you actually put this thing together? I mean, each printer that we set up can effectively fit into a container. So for instance, if we were serving an isolated island like Maui, then our entire printer system can go into one container. And then once it's there, obviously there's a certain amount of equipment necessary to set it up, forklifts and whatnot. I probably can't describe it in too much detail just because there's some pending IP related to it.
Oh, you can tell us. But we get the idea, yeah. But you take the whole kit and caboodle to the site with you. You're sourcing a load of the recycling locally as well. And, you're able to pretty quickly get on the ground and get buildings made. Now, are these just temporary structures, or do you anticipate them lasting for some time?
No, I mean, that was another attraction to kind of selecting recycled plastic, because we all know that it's a headache to dispose of in itself. So we've created these structures, and if I'm honest, plastic's biggest threat is the sun and UV attack. So what we do is we add a UV stabilizer into our print mixture, and then we also put a UV coating on the exterior, so that from our provider we get a 25-year warranty of UV protection. So effectively the main deterrent against the use of plastic, we're providing a defense or armor against it for 25 years minimum, and then obviously it can just be replenished every 20 or so years, so that the life is extended each time. So yeah, we don't see these as being temporary solutions. They have a long life to them.
There's a lifetime. So final few words from this from you then, Peter Guest, then, maybe about the practicalities, or indeed having 3D printers that are that large.
Well, I mean, I find it fascinating. I mean, we've seen in sort of disaster response over the last, I'd say, 20 years, technologies that seemed to have very few practical uses outside of labs or homes, whether it's 3D printers, even drones back in the day in Haiti.
3D printers creating tat at home, basically.
or things that are sort of very industrial, suddenly turning up in places where they're actually needed, and there's a use case that maybe we didn't envision, or maybe the venture capitalists in the start didn't envision as being a humanitarian purpose. It's fascinating.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave it there. I'm sure we'll be back in touch again, Ross, but not until Jess is going to come in with a question, because I was thinking about you during that interview, Jess, because you're thinking about materials and you started the program talking about molecules. This is just too large scale. You're the quantum person in the room here. This is on enormous scales.
But I'm interested in materials for new kinds of technologies. I did a PhD, and a huge amount of UK research effort actually has gone into printed photovoltaics. So kind of using polymer-based materials that can be used as solar cells. And I wondered if there's any of that kind of thinking, that not only can you build this incredibly versatile and robust house out of plastics, but could you also print photovoltaics into the glass for the windows?
And incorporate plastic electronics as well.
Yeah.
Dream scenario for us. Yeah. I mean, right now we use traditional solar panels, and in some cases we use like a thin film solar panel. But yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of something that's readily available to us yet, but that would be many birds with one stone to have solar power being generated from the print material itself as well. So yeah.
Well, when you start doing that,
for the future,
and it's a when rather than an if, then you can thank Jess Wade in this podcast.
We'll collaborate,
planting that little seed. Yeah, there you go. Ross Maguire, thank you so much. That's Ross Maguire of Azure. And let's pick up then with Jess Wade. And that idea then of plastic electronics, which is one of your research interests, as you've said. And this presumably means that such structures as 3D printed homes from polymers, from plastics, they could incorporate sensors, couldn't they? For the weather, seismic sensors.
Yeah, you can do super clever things. I think there's a whole facility in Wales. Wales got a huge amount of money to invest into making these kind of smart homes, and they have photovoltaics as windows. They have sensors that will moderate the color of the window, these kind of photochromic windows to moderate the amount of heat that comes into the building, or to generate electricity if you want to generate electricity in particular weather conditions. So certainly you can start to think about making everything in your household or in new build houses a functional technology that you can use to better inform how you regulate energy dissipation through the building or generate energy as a result of it. I think we can get a lot cleverer. I think we can get a lot more clever if we work between material scientists, engineers, and kind of architects. You could have this beautiful synergy of doing something genuinely innovative and sustainable.
Sure thing. All right. So I also want to talk to you then about Wikipedia, and you're very well known for this, but for those who may not have heard about this kind of this initiative, this effort, this project you've had over the last, 5-6 years, it's to put more women scientists onto Wikipedia. So why specifically, roll back to before you got involved, what was Wikipedia like in terms of representing science by women?
So Wikipedia is obviously a phenomenal platform. Probably everyone in this room's been on it, maybe today, maybe in constructing this script or plan. But it's, this democratized platform for knowledge sharing that is used by everyone all over the world, irrespective of your age or your job description or which political party you affiliate yourself with. People really rely on Wikipedia, and that's quite incredible at this day and age to still have that. It's just over 20 years old. The onset of Wikipedia coincided with the start of the internet, and so you had a small group of dedicated individuals who contributed the majority of content. They were mainly men, and they were mainly in North America. And unfortunately, that demographic hasn't really shifted. You still have between kind of 80 and 90% of Wikipedia editors being men, mostly from the Northern Hemisphere. And if you look at the diversity of the types of topics that they write about, particularly in biographies, it reflects things that they're interested in. So it's kind of, cricket players, footballers, people who build battleships. It's not women scientists. It's not black scientists. It's not really cool Indian engineers. And I think Wikipedia is this phenomenally important platform for knowledge sharing. Working in a university like I do, I have this huge access to knowledge and information all the time that I'm acutely aware other people in the world don't have. And the world would be a much better place if we could share that more freely. And I see Wikipedia as one of these really remarkable platforms to do that on. When I found out that it wasn't quite as perfect as I'd been brought up to believe, I thought I have to do something about that. And I don't like kind of sitting around and moaning about something. I like doing something about it. So I started writing these Wikipedia biographies of women scientists and scientists from other historically excluded groups, and kind of took off. I got really excited about it. I spend my days in a lab or in a lecture theatre teaching, and then I go home at night and have this opportunity to learn about this completely new person or this new concept or this new methodology. And actually, in putting them on the internet, you get them a lot more exposure and recognition as well. So you start to see, this extraordinary mathematician who should have had this recognition in the 70s or 80s is now being honoured in the 2020s because their story is on a platform where everyone can read it. And I find that quite beautiful. And some people have been excited by this project. They've kind of translated these biographies into different languages. Some professors have put it into their undergraduate teaching that their students will now research and write biographies. So it's kind of, it's grown into something that's much, much bigger than me.
Sure. And how many have you done by now?
I've written over 2,000 biographies.
Wow.
Sometimes I get distracted by writing proposals for quantum science, but other than that, I spend...
It's a day job getting in the way.
I still love it. And, I think I've noticed a really big shift. Something I try and do is to look at who's become a fellow of the Royal Society or the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or who's got one of these big prestigious, the MacArthur Genius Grants just came out and things like that. And when you look at these extraordinary places where really bright and remarkable people are celebrated, you're starting to see a lot more diversity in those lists. You're starting to see black scientists recognised a lot more. You're starting to see women scientists in those lists a lot more. And they're equally as exceptional as their male counterparts. They're just finally getting this recognition. So, my job's a lot easier now. I don't have to trawl the internet for people to write about. I just find them in these places.
And actually, maybe the fact that you and the people like you who have become a real big part of this, the fact that these biographies are going up in the first place makes women scientists more likely to win awards and get the accolades. Because who knew? Probably the grant-giving bodies and the people on awards committees, the first thing they do is look somebody up in Wikipedia and, no, she's not there. No, clearly can't be much of a scientist.
It's also more helpful. I've written a bunch of these citations. I nominate people for prizes all the time. And when you're going to sit down to write someone's prize nomination, you don't always have access to their CV. They may not have an up-to-date CV on the internet. You don't necessarily want to tell them. And actually having that information on Wikipedia collected in one place that gives this kind of biographical information, but also a jargon-free introduction to what they've contributed to the field. And that's really, really useful. There was a phenomenal researcher. Everyone cast their minds back to the pandemic, but one of the vaccinologists was a phenomenal woman called Kizzy Corbett. She made the Moderna NIH vaccine. she then went on to become one of Harvard's youngest faculty members. But I wrote her Wikipedia page, and she's just the most sensational woman. And then she was nominated by Fauci for Time Person of the Year. And I like the thought that Fauci read my Wikipedia page that I'd written in writing his citation for Person of the Year.
I bet that happened. All right. And now we want listeners to get in touch as well, because it would be very splendid, dear listener out there, if you can suggest women that you think should be added to Wikipedia. So, female scientists. And I suppose we can widen that out, because we're a tech podcast, to women in tech who should be included and haven't been. So, if you want to fly the flag and let us know, so that we can then let Jess know, and Jess can get very angry about it and then do something about it, then our email address is hello@somewhereonearth.co. That's hello@somewhereonearth.co. And we're on WhatsApp, international code 44 7486 329 484. So that's code 44 7486 329 484. Get in touch. Let us know about your women scientist suggestions, please. Even if you are a woman scientist yourself who's not been on Wikipedia and thinks it's about time that right was wronged, we want to hear from you too. So, Peter, you're listening intently to Jess there and her story and her Wikipedian exploits.
Wikipedian. That's a citizen of the internet, isn't it? It's absolutely fascinating. It's a brilliant initiative. I mean, so I spend a lot of time covering stories about the sort of dark side of the internet, which means I'm spending a lot of time on Twitter or X. And I mean, as we record today, I think that one of the biggest stories has been X's erstwhile new owner taking on Wikipedia and complaining about its funding and so on. And it has made Wikipedia look like this kind of rational island of calm and sanity and sense on a increasingly kind of troubled internet. But I'm really curious actually about your experience on other platforms, because you've talked about this kind of erasure by omission of all of these amazing scientists. But there's kind of very present erasure of diverse voices on other platforms now. It's been going on for years. It seems to me to be getting worse. I'd be curious as to your experiences.
I mean, I don't know how much of it's been by choice. I used to be quite active on Twitter. I used it all the time. It was phenomenally important for me when I was building up my scientific career. And then, probably the day after the new leadership took over, it became a much less exciting or encouraging or inspiring place to me. So, and I think a lot of people from certain demographic groups have been pushed off there because of the hostility that they experience on the site. So I think certainly people who had these platforms and spaces, I would say that the reason that I'm so keen to get women and people from other historically excluded groups in science onto Wikipedia is to kind of level the playing field a little bit. So, the men are on there. Wikipedia is our encyclopedia now, our textbook, our place to archive history. And if you look back in time, people have done a very good job of celebrating the exploits and the achievements of men, and not a very good job of documenting women. So the reason that I really want, you can populate a blog full of women scientists that no one will ever read, but people will keep going to Wikipedia. So I think, yes, other platforms are probably just as good at erasing the contributions of people who've been historically marginalised, but it's incredibly important we make sure women's voices and other silenced voices are shared equally on platforms like Wikipedia and in, conventional journalism and mainstream media as well.
Yeah, and for the next generation of it, because it's something we look at. Each generation of the internet encodes the biases of the one that existed before it, the ownership of it. And now we're moving into an AI, generative AI era where you put scientists into name your AI image generator and it produces a certain set of results based on what was there before.
Right. What was there up to 2021 or something
exactly.
like that. So we're still operating before I really made the 2000 mark.
Okay. Well, Jess, thank you. And let's see what you, Jess, and or Peter have to say about Evan Main-Donald, who's in the studio. You heard him at the top of the programme. I said he was an investor. I didn't say a whole lot more apart from that. But if you want to get to know Evan, he's managing partner of Hyperlight Ventures, which is a venture capital fund which is interested in ventures that generate positive social and environmental impact. And presumably, Evan, you would include in that positive social impact equality and diversity, very much along the lines of the conversation we've just been having.
Absolutely. And I think venture capital has the potential to, if deployed in the right way, to significantly increase or improve social diversity. And it's interesting, actually, that the thing that we were just talking about with Wikipedia, I think Jess said at the outset, because it's a system which was effectively people contribute to voluntarily, it reflects the interests of the people who contributed to it in the first place, which were the demographics of the people who were in the tech industry. And actually, it's interesting because venture capital has traditionally been the sort of home of older white men, and there's a huge opportunity for the democratization of venture capital and the globalization of venture capital to bring the advantages that it brings to the rest of the world, to lots of places which are underserved in terms of investment. And that's something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, sure. So it is that kind of, if I might be a bit wide-eyed about this, making the world a better place, but hey, there's a business case, there's an investment case there, there's money to be made from that as well. Evan, we should say as well, is backing this podcast. Thanks, Evan. Thanks to the fact you're here, I don't have to sell my house, so I appreciate that. So we've had Nana before as well, our other backer on the show not so long ago, and the question I asked Nana is the same one I'm going to pose to you, Evan. And I'm kind of looking for a technology answer here as well about podcasting. What is it about this lo-fi thing, i.e. audio in people's ears, that you think makes such an exciting investment, especially when you're talking about quantum computing these days and all these other things? And believe me, I'm not trying to talk you out of this, but why podcasting, matey? Where's the investment?
So I think, as you know, Somewhere on Earth is not just about podcast. It's about an ecosystem. So the intention is not just to put content out. It's also to create tech for good events. And by the way, the content is about tech for good, which really is the sort of tech that we invest in. And then that feeds into opportunities for investment. And it also potentially feeds into investors who may want to invest in a fund that has the philosophy that a fund like Hyperlight Ventures does, or a venture capital firm that has that like Hyperlight Ventures does. But I think the key to it, really, from my perspective, is that it's a flywheel. And what we do as a venture capital firm, we invest in startups that harness the power of markets to make the world a better place. And the key word is invest. We're not giving money away. We're putting money into companies that have a strong source of competitive advantage and that generate positive social and environmental impact. Because they have a strong source of competitive advantage, they generate exceptional profitability. That profitability allows them to grow and grow quickly. And so the money that we invest means that it makes a return of 100 or 1,000 times what we put into the venture, and that generates 100 or 1,000 times the amount of positive impact than just giving somebody some money to create impact would. So what we're trying to do is change the world through investing in technologies that create that impact.
Yeah. What other kind of technologies have for you, that flywheel effect? And bearing in mind, people are listening to this because they're interested in tech, and perhaps they want to hear from you, and they've already heard some from Jess about what's around the corner, what's the really cool stuff, the kind of stuff that you're looking into now that us lot will probably get around to reporting in a year's time or 5 years' time.
So 3D printed construction is a very interesting one, and I think one of the evolutions of that is 3D printed construction in space. Space tech is a big area, and so the question is, when we get to space, when rockets like SpaceX start taking their payloads up, how are we going to generate dwellings in space? We're probably going to need to 3D print them. Another one is low energy nuclear fusion. So there's a lot of research going into nuclear fusion at the moment, and it looks like we might be quite close to some breakthroughs in those areas. Those sorts of technologies have potential to have a huge impact on the world in terms of climate change. In relation to the 3D printed construction one, that's got an enormous potential to revolutionise construction supply chains. And that particular area it's growing very fast. It's forecast to hit something like 750 billion. This is 3D printed construction by 2031 from a base of about 6 billion today. But that's a very small proportion of the overall value of the global construction industry. So these technologies have huge potential. The potential for nuclear fusion is estimated at something like 41 trillion if somebody can make that breakthrough.
Yeah, but nuclear fusion has been spoken of as one of those technologies. It's the technology of the future and always will be. You must have heard that before, Peter. Have you written about nuclear fusion in your long tech journalist career?
Not nuclear fusion, no, but I mean, how many of these sort of silver bullets have we talked about, up to and including quantum computing for a decade ago when we said it was going to be there around the corner, and we're still kind of waiting. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm detecting, Evan, healthy scepticism from Peter. What about you, Jess?
I think one of the things that comes out from all of this conversation is that we need people with the right skills. You need people with material science skills who can also speak to engineers, who can go and speak to the weird and wonderful quantum physicists. And without all of those conversations happening and without the right technical skills in your population, you'll never be able to do these things. Quantum computing could have happened 10 years ago, but we didn't have physicists who were speaking to engineers and material scientists. So it kind of got stuck in its tracks because you couldn't optimize the materials further without going into different kinds of labs that they didn't have access to. So I really think we need that kind of joined up thinking. We need to inspire a new generation of researchers, and we need to keep them in science and tech jobs so that we can have these kind of breakthrough technologies of the future.
Yeah, so Evan, a lot of it is about just making sure that we have the right people around the table. Of course, there's the high tech, there's the amazing stuff going on in the research labs. But if you don't have the right people and a diverse array of people around the table in a room, then not a lot is going to happen. I suppose that's me telling you that, but I'm putting it to you as a proposition.
Diversity is super important, and social diversity brings cognitive diversity as well. And cognitive diversity brings new ideas. It brings things that if you bring a group of socially non-diverse people together that don't emerge. So it's super important. But I also think this point that we were talking about earlier in terms of the way that venture capital works in the US, or the way that educational establishments interface with venture capital in the US, is important. Jessica, you mentioned government funding earlier on, and of course government funding of research and working with venture capital is important, but the point about universities like Harvard and Stanford and actually investing their endowment funds in venture capital and then getting the benefit of that and putting that back into education is it's a flywheel. In the same way that when we invest in businesses, it creates this flywheel of profitability and impact, and it enables the money that's put in them to actually multiply hundreds or thousands of times. The same thing can happen in the venture capital world, where the profits from venture capital flow back into the endowment funds of the universities, and that gets reinvested in education and research. And that sort of a flywheel, I think, is something that could really turbocharge what we do in venture capital in the UK.
All right, so final and brief words from Jess and then Peter. The flywheel then. I bet you like the science metaphor there, don't you?
No, I love the science metaphor, but I also like this kind of ecosystem approach to creating new technology, to looking at the challenges society faces, to saying what we can actually do with quantum phenomena or optoelectronic devices, and then getting everyone around the table to kind of co-create whatever solution we come up with. I find that particularly inspiring. I think we're doing it really, really well at Imperial, and I look forward to keeping these conversations going with Evan and with Pete about how we can work on it further.
Yeah. Peter?
I think it's fascinating to come full circle to where we started with Wikipedia, right? This is talking about collective endeavour and bringing people together in a room to have conversations. You said cognitive diversity. That isn't something you've seen in the old school of venture capital. There's a lot of herd mentality. You see everyone piling in when it's already a little bit too late because they've been overexcited about it. Precisely. But actually some of the best things that we've seen in technology over the last 20 years have been collective endeavour. It's been scientists working with venture capitalists. It's been ordinary people working with technology. It's socialised response rather than top-down decision-making.
It's like Ross's Homes.
Like
Ross's
Ross's
3D
There you
printed
go,
homes.
as an example. Right, well, we're a very sociable lot here, but we're going to be antisocial now and say goodbye. We need to be out of here. So thank you very much to you, Jess, and Evan, and Peter, and Ross, who we heard from earlier. So yes, we are somewhere on Earth, and we go out, we find stories, we make them news, and then change the world. Yes, we're very modest, aren't we? Let's give you that number again so you can program it into your phone, and then you can just tell us what you think. Send us voice notes, just you name it. So for WhatsApp, it's code 44 7486 329 484. Go on, put us in your favourites. We're worth it. And while you're at it, email us hello@somewhereonearth.co. So there you go. That'll do for this week. We have, over the other side of the glass where the grown-ups are, we have the excellent Stevie Arnoldi and also Keziah Wenham Kenyon. And our editor is Anya Literovich. And we join you from the excellent place here at Lanson's Team Farner. That's why we sound so fabulous. There you go. That was Somewhere on Earth. There'll be more where this came from next time. See you then. Bye-bye.